Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Well, do you consider yourself someone who's really focused, or are you easily distracted? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do you stop when you notice interesting things along the way? I have to admit, it's kind of easy for me to get locked into a particular goal and just block everything else out. I can get into a zone and just forget about what's happening around me. I can sit in the middle of a coffee shop and write because I'm just looking at the screen or my paper, and that's all that I see. And my family kind of knows this about me. I can kind of be this way at times, even maybe occasionally when they're trying to talk to me or something, But if you talk to my wife, she knows there's another side of me as well. We were running some errands a week or so ago and stopped off for some items at Cub. And Maria, when she's in the grocery store, is very goal-oriented. And she had her list, and there was one item that I knew we needed beyond what was on her list. And so I told her I could go and get that and meet up with her to save time. And she stopped and paused and looked at me and said in a very caring and comical tone, "Let's stay together, you might get lost." It's true, I can get easily distracted in grocery stores. I see one more item and then one more. I don't know if that means I share the best or the worst of both worlds, both focusing and remaining open to new opportunities. But I remember we used to watch our daughter play soccer when she was really little, and the ball would go by and she would run in that direction and then notice a bug in the grass or a dandelion. Some of you have had kids too. And which do you think was more interesting to her, soccer or the bug? In life, we do have to strike some kind of balance, We need a sense of purpose and direction. We have to stay on course, but we also can't miss important signs around us about other important priorities or opportunities. Being able to balance our focus and our openness to new opportunities is a skill that's important in many areas of life, but I think it certainly applies to faith and our sense of spiritual purpose as well. Over the course of the pandemic, even those of us who are the most laser-focused and least inclined to veer off course have had to be open to new ways of doing things. We've had to look for those new opportunities, and it's been an important skill for all of us to learn, whether we wanted to do so or not. Learning to use and appreciate online meetings, gathering with family and friends outside in the cold in the worst days of the pandemic, using time at home to cook more or appreciate time alone more. If nothing else, today's message is an encouragement for us not to lose that ability. It's a reminder that sometimes that's how God works. That's how God speaks to us and gets through to us. God can show up in those little signs or distractions along the side of the road. Last week I mentioned our trip to the Gunflint Trail and that we got to see a live moose, which was exciting. I was driving at the time, and it was actually Maria that noticed a car from Iowa pulled off along the side of the road. And she noticed that they seemed to be looking at something. I was the one focused on the road ahead, trying to get to where we were going that day. But her awareness led us to turn around and go back to see what they had pulled over for. And that's how we saw our moose. If I'd been alone or if we weren't looking for the opportunity, we would have just missed it. In today's gospel, Jesus and the disciples are with a huge crowd of people a long walk from town. And it raises a dilemma about how people are going to eat. And then one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Andrew is the one whose eyes are open to opportunity. To the others, it probably seemed just like a distraction, irrelevant. Even Andrew admits that what the boy has isn't sufficient. If you've heard me mention John's version of the feeding of the 5,000 before, you might remember there's something pretty remarkable about the term for fish here. The 2 fish that the boy has are specifically referring to preserved fish. They're little fish. Think canned sardines or pickled herring, maybe, if you like that kind of thing, or not. It's a term that was also used by ancient comedians. Yeah, there was such a thing. Hey, Jesus, this kid has a couple sardines. I mean, do you get the absurdity and comedy in that? This is exactly the kind of kid or adult that the disciples would have cleared away in many other stories. There are stories in the Gospels like that when people come to Jesus with questions or a desire or an offer where, they want to touch his robe and the disciples kind of shoo them away. On one hand, it's easy to judge them for that. We think, wow, how uncaring, how hard-headed. But I think if we're serious and reflective, it's part of this ongoing challenge and balance between focus on one hand and openness to what's new on the other hand. How can you stay on course and on mission if you get sidetracked by every idea and request along the way? At the same time, if you're not open to new opportunities, you miss out. And I just want to acknowledge that there may never be a perfect balance. We're human. We will miss things. We can't possibly notice everything or stop for everything, and that's okay. You're forgiven if you miss some things along the way. Andrew is the hero in this story. He noticed. The others didn't. But we simply celebrate those little God moments when they do occur. They're a gift. And that's part of what community is for as well. It just took one disciple to notice what the boy had. It just took one person in the car to notice a potential moose sighting. As a faith community, what are the things we need to stay focused on? And what are the new opportunities we should be looking out for? How do we know the difference between when God may be trying to give us a sign and when we might just be getting lost in the grocery store? The feeding of the 5,000 was one of many miracles or signs that Jesus performed. They pointed to his identity as divine, as the Son of God. And sometimes people will ask for a sign from God to prove that God is real. Even today, give me a sign, God. What's interesting about the signs Jesus performed in the Bible is that as much as we think a sign will help us believe, they really weren't quite enough for the large crowds even back then. They were amazing for a moment, and then people wanted more, something even better. The business of signs, of creating amazing experiences, of giving people what they're asking for, may not always be what's actually needed. Often there's something deeper, something more profound and complex that all of us yearn for. After the feeding of the 5,000, we hear what seems to be a common refrain that comes from the crowd. They were saying, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." That was a flattering conclusion for them to draw. But instead of appreciating that truth for what it was and giving thanks and praise and worshiping him, we learn that Jesus realized they were actually about to come and take him by force to make him king. And so he withdrew to a mountain by himself. Instead of engaging in the needs and requests of the crowds, this time Jesus removes himself and refocuses on his core mission. The crowd wanted his spiritual identity and presence to be converted into political power and progress, and that wasn't his mission. That was the moment he pivoted back. And so part of forging that balance is knowing how to look for opportunities and when to pursue them, and yet also when to reflect on your original purpose and get back to that as well. There is an ebb and flow. And so as we move forward, we're always remembering our core mission and vision while keeping some flexibility, not endless flexibility, not so we get lost along the way, but so that we remain open to the new word and experiences that God has for us. That kind of flexibility requires patience and practice. It's worth staying in practice so that we can experience what God has to give us along the way. May we be open to that in the weeks and months ahead. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.